Joining us now, one career pilot who has flown these Black Hawk helicopters for quite some time now, and who flew them in the same airspace where yesterday's tragedy happened. Mike Sagely, he currently flies for the Los Angeles Fire Department. He's been fighting those fires there in the West Coast. He has, of course, manned the controls of this type of helicopter that collided with the American Airlines flight over the Potomac River. Mike, we greatly appreciate your availability and your insight here. First, what went through your mind when you learned of this terrible accident in D.C.?
Well, anytime something of this magnitude happens, especially fatalities, the entire aviation community feels it. And it's just a horrible sinking feeling to know that it's such a tragic outcome and the suffering that the families are going to go through. So it's just terrible. And, um, I just, my heart goes out to those people that are suffering tonight. And it's just bad. It's bad all the way.
We know that DC's airspace is already relatively congested. You got military flights, commercial flight restrictions near the nation's capital, the White House, the U.S. Capitol. It makes it a unique challenge, as you know, for pilots. Take us inside the cockpit. What do those communications look and sound like for a military helicopter pilot between air traffic control operators near DCA?
Right. So we're of course, it doesn't matter if you're military, you're still required to communicate with ATC appropriately and follow established routes and or restrictions on those and or any instructions or restrictions that ATC provides on you. So yes, it is busy. It's a busy area. There is a specific established route there along the Potomac near the airport. And it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon to have helicopters and commercial aircraft working in close proximity to each other. And of course, there are various control measures. We do that a lot out here in LA, specifically around Burbank and LAX. So the fact that there was a helicopter flying on a specified route in, near, or around commercial traffic, that part is pretty common.
I want to follow up on that. This helicopter and this plane were reportedly 350 feet off the ground when they crashed. I have seen some reporting that helicopters aren't supposed to be higher than 200 feet along this stretch by the airport. What can you tell us about that?
That's correct. That particular route has a ceiling, meaning height above ground, of 200 feet. Similarly, we have one here at LAX. We have to stay below 900 feet. So you are expected to comply with that, and it does not necessarily need to be specified by ATC or air traffic controllers.
During your time flying over the Potomac, go ahead, you finish that thought there.
I was going to say on specified routes that have published, meaning published restrictions or requirements on it.
During your time flying this same route, was there any opportunity granted to fly on a training mission above 200 feet?
Not for me personally. If they wanted to deviate from the route, I would imagine that that would be under specified approval by ATC, the air traffic controller. So in other words, let's just say they wanted to deviate off of that route to the east, they would coordinate that with air traffic and say, this is what I would like to do. And they would, of course, approve that or deny it, and then give any restrictions or other instructions that might need to be appropriate for the situation or the condition.
And ATC, air traffic control, as you had mentioned, it apparently asked the Army crew if they saw this passenger jet and to go around, but mere seconds later, I'm sure you've seen it, we saw that explosion in the sky. We don't yet know what the pilot saw at the time, but I did want to ask, how fast can pilots like yourself make immediate maneuvers once that a threat is identified?
Well, that's an interesting, good question, and that doesn't have a specific answer to it. Unfortunately, in a chain of events that leads up to something like this, you hope that that chain is broken with enough time to identify, assess, and react. But unfortunately, in some instances, that action is already so far along that the best of circumstances, the greatest pilot on the planet may not be able to to recover, and that's the unfortunate part. You hope that it happens within enough time for you to uh, appropriately assess it and avoid it, but sometimes it just does not happen that way.
We know the crash happened without fog, though. Of course, it was dark. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth just says that night vision goggles were on board. Would that make a difference here generally? I saw some reporting that the lights that are in and around D.C. might prove problematic for any night vision tech.
It could. It's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. It might not be the direct cause, but it certainly could be a potentially contributing factor. In the urban environment, there is so much light, and the night vision goggles are so sensitive that they lose a bit of their effectiveness, and kind of washout would be a simple term. It gets almost too bright, and sometimes it makes it difficult for short periods of time to identify something like an aircraft, for that matter. Some of it depends on the distance, depends on the angle that you're viewing the object, whether you're above it or below it, looking up at the skylight versus looking down at the ground. So there's a lot of factors in there, and I don't think we're going to be able to figure that out after a lot more examination.
What do you think some of this critical flight data and those black boxes, as we typically call them, is going to reveal? And what might the NTS be asking the Army right now?
Well, they have the radar tracks, they have the voice recordings, they're going to have the black box on the aircraft to know its exact speed, altitude, heading, whether it's climbing or descending. They'll be able to piece together the exact timeline on what instructions were given, what response by the pilot was given, meaning him responding to ATC and his request. So they'll piece that together, and they should have the recording on board the helicopter itself. I think that will provide some insight on exactly how or what the timeline and as it unfolded, and may shed some light on it. It may not. It just depends. But I think it will. All those pieces together are definitely going to produce a better picture as time goes on. And that's the one thing that's kind of hard to do is to be patient as these things unfold, because it's very emotional and very dramatic, obviously.
Wide-reaching, dramatic, just a horrible tragedy. I did want to ask before I let you go. You're a busy guy, so I appreciate your time. But I did want to ask you, what questions do you have right now in terms of what investigators are hoping to find out leading up to this accident?
Well, it's man, it's just very complex. It's the difficult part about it is, we continually advance in technology. We hope that the training of aircrew members continues to get better and better as time goes on. We have like ADSB, for example, GPS-based position reporting that provides very clear guidance on the direction of aircraft, altitude, etc., radar in the tower. All these systems in place, as I refer to them. And you'd like to think that they're 100% and could always avoid this type of tragedy, but it just doesn't, because of the human element in there. And I hope that when they put this all together, that they can come up with something pretty firm on why it happened, so that we can figure out ways to avoid it from ever happening again.
Triumph out of tragedy would certainly be the goal here. Mike Sagely, thank you so much. I appreciate you, and thank you for your service.
You're very welcome. Thank you.